mental health care should not just be brought in and offered when somebody's, so far down the line that they're putting their hand up and asking for the help. If they've put their hand up and asked, you've probably left it too long.
Welcome back to 40 Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders. From purpose-led entrepreneurs to Olympic champions, you'll learn firsthand from today's successful leaders on what it takes to be brilliant, all in just 40 minutes. According to the Mental Health Foundation, better mental health support in the workplace can save UK businesses up to £8 billion a year. And with that mic drop-worthy stat, we enter our second installment of our 40-Minute Mentor Wellbeing series. Today, we're joined by Sançar Sahin, the co-founder of Oliva, the employee mental wellbeing platform for companies who want their people to show up feeling their best and do their best work. By combining one-to-one therapy and coaching, self-guided content, live talks, dedicated support for managers, and mental fitness classes, all led by a curated team of top professionals, Oliva helps employees respond to whatever hurdles life throws at them, big or small, at work and beyond. Evidence suggests that over 50% of all sickness days in the UK can be attributed to mental health conditions. So I cannot wait to dig into what employers can do to significantly improve well-being at work and build a culture in which people can truly open up about their mental health. Welcome, Sançar. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. How are you?
Hey, James, thanks for having me. Yeah, great, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And before we dive into all things Oliva and learning about your career, I'd love to get to know you a little bit better, and I'm sure our listeners will too. So we'll start with some quick fire questions. So please finish these sentences after me. Well-being means to me
to take responsibility for what gives me energy, what takes away energy, and the boundaries that I set to set myself up for success.
Great answer. Thank you. Second question. A misconception people have about me is
that I'm easygoing. I'm actually quite neurotic.
Okay. Why do people think you're easygoing out of interest?
I think on the outside, I can appear quite easygoing. And, if you interact with me in most scenarios, I would probably come across quite easygoing. But for those who really know me and have seen me in my most stressful moments and the things I get stressed about, they'll know my neuroses in a little bit more detail.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. The last time I cried was when?
When my sister died. So my sister died just over a year ago.
I'm so sorry. Thank you for sharing this. I really appreciate it. I look after my mental health by...
So kind of what I was saying before. So trying to set and protect my boundaries, understanding myself, what makes me tick, what gives me energy, what takes away my energy, and optimizing for that as much as possible. And kind of more practically speaking, I have a dog. I make sure I'm outside as much as possible, walking the dog to try and disconnect from the screen. I try and eat healthily. I'm definitely not perfect at any of these things. I don't really go to the gym that much, to be frank, but I try and just understand what makes me tick and then optimize as much as possible for that and not be too hard on myself when I'm not very good at it.
That last point is really important, isn't it? We all go through these periods of trying to live that perfect existence, and it's just not realistic, is it, in modern day life to do all the things. If you're trying to build positive habits around a lot of this health and well-being, then that's a good start, and you can fall off the wagon, you can have bad days.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to tell you that I wake up at 6 a.m. every morning, go for a 15-mile run, meditate for 45 minutes and then, drink a green smoothie, but it's just not the case. Yeah, I think perfection in the routine doesn't really exist, so you've just got to get a little bit better every day.
Yeah, 100%. Everyone listening to this will have seen those posts about those perfect days, which I think are all bullshit, to be honest. This comes from somebody that was due to wake up at 6:30 today, overslept. My daughter came in and was in my face at like 7:15 going, "Daddy, I need breakfast, I'm starving." I'm like, oh God, the day has started off terribly. Final question. If there was one thing I could change about entrepreneurship, it would be...
the toxicity, the bro culture, all of that kind of crap.
You're not the first person to say that, and I couldn't agree more. Already really appreciate how open and vulnerable you've been in those quickfire questions, and I'm really looking forward to digging in more to your career. So for those that don't know you, you've had a very successful marketing career, working with the likes of Typeform and Hotjar, to name a few, before you decided to go all in on entrepreneurship and build Oliva. So can you share a bit more about your earlier career in marketing and what sort of made you go into entrepreneurship and start your own business?
So I always saw myself as a creative, I guess. So when I was, at college age and university age, I was really into creating content in some way. And you've got to understand this is 20 plus years ago, right? So this is not, this is pre-Instagram and all of this kind of stuff. I would like to kind of make music and little like radio shows and, nerdy stuff. Like that, I got into like amateur photography and all of this kind of stuff. A bit of writing. I studied radio production at university, and I was pretty certain that I wanted to go into making radio documentaries. I wanted to be behind the microphone, piecing together, editing together stories about real things. And I was pretty certain I wanted to do that. Having gone through university, as is very common, especially in the UK, I think, people do 3 years of a degree and then realize that they don't want to do anything to do with that degree they've just done. I realized that, the actual industry of radio wasn't quite what I wanted or expected. It's quite hard to get by. It was quite hard to, really forge a career in it. And, it kind of felt more like a desk job with a microphone to me. So it just didn't quite feel like what I wanted it to be. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I fell into a job for an early stage startup. I moved to Barcelona when I was about 22, having no idea if I would be there for a few months or a few years. I ended up being there for 15 years. And I was very lucky because when I arrived, it was kind of the beginning of the Barcelona startup ecosystem. So today it's a thriving startup and technology hub. And there are some incredible companies coming out of it, and some, with kind of $1 billion valuations. Not that it's all about that, but just to kind of give an idea of how it's grown. When I went to Barcelona, there were just a few of these startups, and they were trying to emulate what they were seeing in Silicon Valley, in terms of these like fancy offices and, flexible working, all of that. So it was a very interesting time to go. And I was lucky to get a position at a early stage company where I was like, okay, this is startups. Like, this was all new to me. I was in a kind of marketing and sales role, and it just started from there. I just went to different startups in marketing roles, and I learned that I could bring this kind of creative side of me to this business side. I could use the creative side to actually have an impact in business. Somehow I could forge a career out of it. So that's kind of how it happened. And then was lucky to be a part of a few other early stage startups that went on to be very successful. So a lot of luck, a lot of kind of randomness, but, trying to bring together things that I enjoyed. So I never really set out to found my own startup, but I did know that I wanted to keep building things from an early stage. And when the pandemic hit, as with many of us, I think, it became very, very clear that I wanted something meaningful. Like, I really wanted to be waking up every day doing something that felt meaningful to me. So I was fortunate to be introduced by an ex-colleague and a friend to a guy called Javi Suarez, who previously co-founded a company called Travel Perk, which is another Barcelona startup that did extremely well and grew to huge proportions in a short amount of time. Both of us, it turned out, had gone through experiences of burnout in our roles, and both of us had looked for support from a professional, i.e. a therapist, and found the whole experience to be completely backwards, old-fashioned, chaotic, cumbersome, all of that kind of stuff. And so we really connected on the problem we had experienced, the lack of solution that we had experienced, and what we wanted to do about it. So that's when we decided to come together.
Amazing. And how have you found that shift into founder life? And what advice would you have for any other fellow marketers that are thinking about making a similar sort of move?
Don't do it. No, I'm joking. So, of course, I've loved it. On the whole, I love it. Mostly because of the mission that kind of sits at the bottom of all of this, what we're trying to achieve and the people we help, but also, just being able to kind of create your own destiny and, have a vision and make it come true as being incredible. And I think that's the amazing side of doing, going your own way. You can literally be sat down with your co-founder talking over a beer, talking about all of the dreams you have for how this could look, and how we could give people access to high quality mental health care, and the ways we would enable that. You can go from talking about it to fast forwarding a little bit, where you've got it, and it's tangible, and you can put it in the hands of real people. And that's the amazing side of going it alone, taking something from just an idea in your mind to something that really exists, which is incredible. But of course, it comes with a lot of stress. It comes with a lot of anxiety. You're responsible for real people. We're responsible for our employees, but more so, we're not selling SaaS. My world is pure SaaS. Typeform was a form and survey builder. Hotjar was they still are, web analytics tool. This is technology. It has a lot of similarities, but we're talking about real people and real relationships and real problems and real challenges and real outcomes. You can't mess around with this stuff. So that comes with the good, which is the impact you can have, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility and anxiety sometimes as well.
We've talked a little bit about Oliva, but for those that don't know what the business is, tell us a bit about where that idea came from, how it works, and what our listeners could expect by signing up.
In summary, Oliva is a workplace mental well-being platform and partnership. So we don't just give you a bit of software and a platform and leave you alone. We partner with you to make it successful and make it land, make it actually have an impact. We sell to generally the HR manager, the benefits manager, the employee experience manager within organizations, anywhere from agencies of 5 people all the way up to companies of 3,000 and sometimes more people. They launch it into the company as an employee benefit. So much like they would for, private medical insurance or corporate gym memberships and things like that, it's launched as a foundational employee benefit. So as a company, we're not responsible for everybody's mental health, as employers, but we are responsible for providing a psychologically safe environment while these employees are part of our journey. We are responsible for providing high quality support and resources so that other people can take responsibility for their own well-being. We do have a role to play in terms of responsibility when it comes to our employees' mental health. We're not there to hold hands and to be parental, we're there to offer the right tools. So in short, we're a workplace mental well-being platform. We're rolled out as an employee benefit to all of the employees in the company. We have a web app and you can access through mobile as well. The employees can access on-demand mental well-being support without having to raise their hand and ask for it. So it's completely confidential. They can just log straight in and they can access things like one-to-one coaching, one-to-one therapy. They can access mental health classes in a group format, which are a little bit more interactive. They can access exclusive Oliva talks, they're called. So they're like TED-style talks, but all around mental well-being and, under 20 minutes, designed to inspire you to think a bit differently about your mental health. We just had an incredible talk by a sexologist, for example, talking about how your sex life impacts your work life. So things like this, we push you to think a little bit differently and don't just serve up the usual mundane content that nobody wants to actually use. So we have all of these different ways that you can support your own mental well-being, both proactively and reactively. So proactively, it's like going to the gym. You build that muscle to be able to weather the storm that all of us have to go through in life. And reactively, if you're struggling with something in particular, be it going through a divorce, being a brand new parent, be it a family bereavement or whatever it might be, or a diagnosis like OCD, we can support with that with highly specialized and experienced and certified therapists and psychologists.
I love it. It's an amazing mission. And, as somebody who has suffered from burnout and anxiety, whose family members have had quite severe challenges around mental health and have lost friends to suicide, I wish this existed earlier in my career when I actually feel like I really could have needed it. And it's just amazing to see how things have shifted now to this being very mainstream and something that a lot of companies and and people are taking much more seriously, because I think it will save lives, and I think it will make a lot of organizations much better places to work. Huge kudos to you for building it.
Sorry to hear that you've been through those things as well. The sad truth is that it's very common. If you think about it, if you look at your organization, let's say you have 100 people, 200 people, 500 people, whatever, you kind of zoom into each of those minds. There's something going on in every single one of those minds. So if you assess your employee mental health as, are people burnt out or not? Has somebody told me they're depressed or not? If that's the level you go to assess, do I need to offer support? You're going too shallow. Because everybody has something, and everybody is traveling through this thing called life. And life is not all sunshine and rainbows. People die, pets die, people get divorced, people struggle with identity issues, people get bullied, people get sexually assaulted. People are dealing with this stuff all of the time. And as you mentioned, suicide, unfortunately, is a huge issue. It's the single biggest killer for men aged under 45, which is incredible. So yeah, it's important that we remember that mental health care should not just be brought in and offered when somebody's so far down the line that they're putting their hand up and asking for the help. If they've put their hand up and asked, you've probably left it too long.
It's so true. When I hear this and I see the more open conversations being had now, it fills me with a lot of hope. When I was at university, a friend played in the same rugby team as I. He was suffering. None of us knew. None of us talked about it. A typical blokey mentality. All thought everything was sunshine and rainbows and beers and fun, and one day friends went back to their house and he had committed suicide, and it was the biggest shock. And although that happened, it probably still was 10, 15 years until maybe some of those people and some of us have actually felt we could talk about some of these things and actually be more open and vulnerable about that experience, but also our own mental health. And so I really am so happy that this is becoming more mainstream. And it's great to see, since launching in 2020, that you're now active in over 30 countries. You work with companies like Sifted, Learnably, Marshmallow. It's just awesome to see, and I hope it will continue to scale. I wanted to ask, what have been for you the biggest challenges of scaling a mental health startup since you launched?
One of the big challenges with what we do is, like I said at the beginning, it's not just technology. It's not just SaaS. It's technology plus people and different groups of people. You have the practitioners who provide the care, and you have the end users that receive the care. So kind of scaling and keeping a high level of quality is our North Star, essentially. How do we maintain ultra high quality while scaling up, both the number of people accessing the platform and the people providing the care on the platform? What we noticed very early on is with other providers, and you only have to Google this in the US to see all the bad press that's been surrounding some of the US based providers that do this at a massive scale. They often neglect the mental health practitioner as an important piece of the puzzle. So they treat them as a commodity, essentially. What happens through that is it completely lowers the standard of care, because they're human beings, right? So if they don't feel good going to work, and they don't have the right tooling to do their work properly, they don't have the right support, of course they're not going to do as good a job at doing what they're there to do. And these people, they care. They want to provide care. But if you as a business, in the name of scale, make that more difficult for them, by making them feel more isolated, by not providing that tooling for them, that will have an impact on the quality of care, and then that's going to have an impact on real lives. It's something we've embedded deeply into our business from day one. To give an example, the first senior hire that we made as a business was our Chief Clinical Officer, Dr. Sarah Bateup. She has nearly 40 years of experience in the space, was one of the first people to actually introduce CBT therapy to the NHS in the UK, like very renowned in the space. We could have easily, at that stage, we were extremely early stage, we could have easily done what everybody else did and either not hire any clinical expertise at all into the team and just use marketing to basically say that, we're clinical, which you would be surprised how much this happens today, how many providers there are that don't have a single clinical profile on their team. Or we could have had some kind of pseudo hire, like a therapist, not to downgrade the value of a therapist, but in terms of senior decision making at scale, we truly believe you need somebody with the experience to back up those decisions. So we could have easily have made those easy decisions to save cost, to save complexity. But from day one, it was very, very clear to us that the quality of the care would be embedded into the whole system.
It's a great way of doing it. I've heard incredible things about the business. What's been your personal highlight so far the last few years?
The thing I reference quite a lot is a bit of user feedback that we got very early on. So when, we had hardly launched into many companies at all. So it was very early. And to be completely frank, our offering was still quite thin on the ground. At that point, we were only offering one-to-one video sessions with therapists. Since then, we've launched a bigger variety of ways to access support and in different ways that suits you. But somebody wrote in the feedback, they just wrote, "This platform saved my life." Now, I don't know if they meant that literally or figuratively. I don't know. But to be honest, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, just that is something that anchors me back a lot when we continue doing what we're doing. I think about that comment a lot, and that is why we do it. So that was a highlight for me, just the idea that somebody probably didn't have easy access to mental health support before their company put their money where their mouth was and truly said, we're going to back up these fancy claims we make about being people first, etc., by providing you proper support. It's amazing the company that, when companies do this, that company did that. And because of that, somebody who would not have had easy access to high quality mental health support before now had easy access and could write a comment like that. That's something that always anchors me back.
Yeah, the ultimate validation of the work you're doing. I mean, that's incredible. I guess there are going to be founders and managers and people leaders listening to this that will be like, amazing, like, this sounds incredible. Who is Oliva best suited to, and what results have some of your clients seen since you started the business?
We work with companies from tiny agencies of just a few people to larger mid-market, I would say, type companies. So kind of up to 3,000 employees. We can work with bigger, but to be completely frank, our sweet spot is probably for that mid-market, anywhere from a couple of hundred employees to 3,000 employees, more or less. That's where we can really roll out the red carpet for you and really be a partner to you, offer you extra resources, because these companies are stretched in terms of their resources. They can't afford to have like huge wellbeing teams, so it's always a concern for them. Like, I speak to companies every day that say, look, I really care about this for my team. How do I launch this? Like, how do I advocate for this over time? Like, how do I, embed this into our culture? I've got a million other things to think about and I don't have a team dedicated to this. So what we do is we make that as easy as possible for you. We have designers on hand, data scientists on hand. We have a dedicated wellbeing partner. So basically, we're an extended team for you. So that's where we can really roll out the red carpet, that kind of mid-market category, I would say. But we do work with small agencies. Like I said, they can get access to the platform and get a lot of value from it. We work with all different types of companies and different industries as well, actually, interestingly as well. I can't exactly 100% confirm this because I don't have access to other providers' data. But from what I've seen, heard from our own analysis, we've got pretty industry record-breaking engagement rate. That the average EAP, Employee Assistance Program, they're kind of really well known for getting to 1 to 5% of the whole company if you're lucky. Like, they're just not used by anybody because they're so old-fashioned, clunky. The whole business model is designed not to encourage usage, but to discourage usage. The minute that anybody, a significant number of people actually use it, the whole business model breaks. We've flipped that on its head. So we typically get more than 50% of the company engaging with our platform meaningfully. So not just logging in, like meaningfully engaging. And in many cases, much, much more. And of course, engagement is quite subjective because, it depends on the time period. It depends on the challenges in your company at the time. But we see really, really incredible engagement rates. So first of all, the impact is we can get to a large population in your company. We've proven that. We can really get to the majority of your company. That's one. Two is we get extremely high satisfaction scores from people who use our services, be it one-to-one therapy or our group class is, very, very high satisfaction. And 3, we've got proven what's called reliable improvement. So we can actually prove that our services are having a scientifically measurable impact on people's well-being. So this is measured with clinical surveys called GAD-7, PHQ-9. It basically tells you, is there a marked difference in this person's well-being from when they first came to us versus once they've engaged with our services? We've got those kind of proof points. And then from the companies, what we hear is there's this incredible employer branding opportunity. We hear their employees saying, this is the best perk we've ever been given. We don't like to describe ourselves as a perk, but it's fine. We get these incredible comments on G2 and Google reviews. Like, you can see employees of companies going online to write a review. So think about it. These are people who, if you talk about stigma around mental health, they've broken through the wall of stigma and they're going online, putting their name to a review about how they've done therapy with us and loved it. So we get all of this qualitative feedback as well. And then what we hear from companies is that we have a tangible impact on employee retention from the point of view of the company really putting their money where their mouth is and saying, we care about you, here's the proof, we're going to offer you this. But also think about it, like if you are with your therapist that is provided through a platform that your work is paying for, you're pretty locked into that. You know what I mean? Like if you're working with a therapist you love. So yeah, we just get this incredible feedback from companies, which is great.
Awesome. I wanted to come on to talking about burnout. It's something that you touched upon, you've experienced. It's something that I have, and I'm sure many of our listeners can relate, particularly during the pandemic when it seemed like there was nothing else to do. So we all just overworked and probably didn't look after ourselves enough. Can you tell us just a bit about your experience? What led to it? What were some of the early warning signs that perhaps you should have been aware of or going forward be aware of?
Most people I speak to who have experienced burnout, they had a moment of realization. And actually they're the lucky ones, right? We're the lucky ones when something is obviously put in front of your face, which kind of, puts a mirror in front of you and you're like, okay, something is not right here. Obviously, a lot of people kind of will just keep going without realizing that, and that's where it can be quite dangerous. So I was lucky to have that realization. And that happened when I finished work on a Friday, I went back home, and as my girlfriend and I often did on a Friday after work, we would order a takeaway curry. I did the ordering on Deliveroo, and I ordered what I thought was 2 chicken tikka masalas. What I actually ordered was 2 chicken tikkas. Your listeners who are curry fans, you'll know the one has sauce, it's like a meal, and the other one is just bits of chicken, without the sauce. So when it arrived and I realized my mistake, I was so angry with myself. It really ruined my evening. I was just like pissed off. I just thought I was completely useless. How useless am I? I can't even order a curry correctly. Like, how can I lead a marketing team? And how can I be a successful partner? How can I, all of that kind of stuff. I just felt completely useless. And my girlfriend just looked at me and said, something's not right. Like, it's just a curry. It doesn't matter. And actually what we got is quite nice. We can put some tomato sauce on. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, yeah. So that's when I started looking for a therapist, kind of got onto that journey of unpacking what I had been experiencing. And looking back, now I can reflect and say the reason I got myself into that position is not because of work, not because work was asking me to work too much or whatever it might be. Because ultimately it was my responsibility. My well-being is my responsibility. I essentially didn't understand myself that well. I couldn't articulate my values. I couldn't articulate what gave me energy, what took away energy. I couldn't protect boundaries. I couldn't do that effectively. I couldn't say no enough. Then that's what led to me being in that position. So how to avoid being in that position is basically learning the practical skills to be able to set those boundaries, to articulate your values, to understand what gives you energy and what takes away energy, and to optimize your time and life a bit more for that.
I'm sure a lot of people out there will really appreciate and relate to what you've just said. I think back on the times, unfortunately it's plural, where I've burnt out. I think in the early days of running JBM, I almost very foolishly saw it as a bit of a badge of honor, that you work so hard, so intense, so focused, so 24/7 just to kind of build something. And you realize actually you're not working in a productive way. You're not working smart, and you're just actually making a lot of mistakes because you're knackered and you're probably not being that much fun to be around. I had quite a few moments where I would get ill. I'd have panic attacks. I'd be doing crazy things in the night, just waking up. I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but when my daughter came along, I was sort of 5 years into running my business, was working long hours, high pressure, and I worked even harder, even though I was very sleep deprived, struggling with the whole concept of being a dad because I just felt I wasn't prepared for it. And my wife was incredible, taking the vast majority of the slack. But I woke up one night and I was trying to wind my wife because I thought it was, I was in some weird trance where I'd been so used to winding the baby at night time. And she was like, what the hell are you doing? It's just things like that. And you realize like, well, there's a lot going on here. You need to take some time for yourself and you've got to unpack some of this stuff. A whole load of stress and anxiety like building up in me. And
was there a point of realization where you went from, seeing it as a badge of honor, like this is what you're supposed to do when building a business, this is how you win? Was there a point of realization between that and actually there could be another way, maybe this isn't healthy?
Yeah, there was actually, and I'm thankful for it, but I'm also annoyed with myself that it took the pandemic to realize. I continue to work these slightly insane hours, like a lot of people do, not sort of humble bragging. It was, in hindsight, really stupid, the amount I worked, because I don't think I was that effective. It was only the pandemic when I was forced to be at home all day, spend really good quality time with my daughter and my wife. I didn't have to commute every day, and I live in Sussex, so it's 2.5 hour commute a day. Just realized, wow, I can go for a walk every day. I can do every bedtime, every bath time, and I've never looked back, kind of claimed back a big chunk of my life and realized how important that was to me. Even though I always knew it was, I felt I had to work really hard to provide for my family. It was this kind of warped mentality, and I really, really regret the first a lot of that, because I missed big chunks of my daughter's life. And anyone that knows me knows that is really what is most important to me, is being a dad and a husband, and family comes first. So for me, it was a big moment of realization.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing it. And I think it's so common that when you get these moments of realization and, you go on the journey to learn about yourself and reflect, it's really common to feel guilty about it and annoyed at yourself about like, why didn't I know this or do this before? But if you think about it, if you did, that realization would never have been there. So it's just kind of like unrealistic. Life is progression and learning these things, and to expect to know all of this stuff straight away is unrealistic, if you know what I mean. So it's good that some of us are lucky to get those moments of realization so that we can make adjustments earlier rather than later. Some people go their whole lives without ever coming to these realizations.
You're so right. I guess we talked around some of the highs and lows. I guess I've shared some of the roller coaster emotions that come with founder life, and you'll be experiencing this now. And I think I saw a LinkedIn post of you where you talked about entrepreneurs being 2 times more likely to suffer depression compared to the general population. So how are you looking after your mental health right now? And for any founders that are listening that are kind of very conscious that perhaps their mental health is being detrimentally impacted by current behaviors or just sort of routine, like what advice can you give them?
For me, what I've learned is it's a constant iteration, and it's not about, okay, I've learned this about myself, so I'm going to correct it and now I'm perfect at that. Like often I'll go back into bad habits even though I've already learned that bad habit can damage my mental health. So for example, I know that I feel 10x better from going for a walk at lunchtime, getting outside of the house and walking and just listening to a podcast or music or nothing, versus if I don't do that and I have a quick lunch and I go back to work. But still, when I feel like I've got a massive to-do list and I just need to get through stuff, I'll still convince myself that the better option is to plow through the work rather than go for the walk. But I know it's not good for me. So first of all, what I've learned is just to be a little bit less hard on myself and just to allow myself to just remember that this is what's good for me, this is what's bad for me, and just, kind of get myself out of that bad habit as much as possible. It's not always possible. And 2 is there are certain things that I've tried to build into my routine that, again, I'm not perfect at doing them, but I know they help. So I try and do them as much as possible. But simple things like I stopped drinking coffee after 12 o'clock. So I still like coffee. I actually now squeeze in like a couple cups before 12, but after 12, I stopped drinking it because I've seen that it affects my sleep. Red wine, I love it, but it massively impacts my sleep, like negatively. I think because of the sugar, it just makes me a really light sleeper. So I hardly drink red wine. like I said, I try and get out with my dog as much as possible and just get as much sunlight as possible. Not always easy in London. More than anything, protect my boundaries. So we do something which some of your listeners will have come across called a user manual for everybody in Oliva. Everybody, when they joins, they write their own user manual, which basically is a instruction book for how to work with that person. So they say things like, I'm an introvert, so I appreciate time to digest information and be alone. Don't be offended. I just like to spend time by myself. Or I'm an extrovert, so you might see me like pinging you left, right, and center on these channels, but I'm not expecting a response. So we kind of tell people how to work with us. I try and update that user manual and really more for myself than anyone else. And that allows me to continuously learn about what makes me tick. For example, when we do company offsites, I used to always volunteer to share a room because, it saves costs. It's the thing to do. It's sociable. It just feels like the right thing to do. I'm a founder. Of course I should, be modeling that behavior. But now I've learned if I don't have a room to myself where I can just go back and just digest and just have time to myself, I lose energy and I just can't be a good participant of that event. So I always have a room to myself now.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And what advice do you have for any leaders listening to this who want to make their teams feel more comfortable with opening up when it comes to mental health and well-being? Like, what can they do to create that sort of environment?
It really starts with the people leading the company. They need to model the behavior that they want to see. So if they want people to be more vulnerable, be more vulnerable. If they want people to set healthier boundaries, set healthier boundaries. It just doesn't make sense to say things to people like, come as your whole self, tell us when you're struggling at home or whatever. If the leaders are, macho, bro culture, hustle culture guys and just like not modeling any of that behavior. So it starts with modeling the behavior you want to see and really standing behind your words. That's where psychological safety comes from. Psychological unsafety comes from when people say things like, come to work as your whole self, and then somebody comes in and says, I'm just not feeling that motivated today. Like, I'll be good tomorrow. Like, I think I can get myself back on track. But like today, I think I just need to do some admin tasks because I'm not feeling motivated. And the manager says, well, what the hell are you doing here? Like, that's where psychological unsafety comes from, because you're asking somebody to come and be honest and be themselves, but then you're setting a completely unrealistic expectation. Lead from the front, model the behavior that you want to see, and stand behind your words.
Great advice, Sançar. Thank you. Before we get to our wrap-up questions, I just wanted to ask, obviously outside of offering Oliva, what are some of the best well-being and mental health benefits that you've seen businesses offer that have a real impact for employees that we can leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think, it's less so perks and things like this, and it's more flexibility, the way they do policies, the way they give feedback as well, just making sure everybody knows where they stand, everybody knows what their expectations are. That's what provides psychological safety, and that's the foundation of good mental health. And then you can add on things like Oliva. If you bring something like Oliva and everyone's afraid to use it because there's no psychological safety and there's no trust, you're not going to get that much value from Oliva, So we can help with those things, but it needs to start with you. But yeah, things like making it clear to people who menstruate, for example, that if you're struggling on a particular day or a couple of days and, it's just taking away your energy, that's an okay reason not to show up for a day. That kind of thing, like making it very, very clear, making it a very inclusive environment for people, not just changing your logo to the rainbow flag once a year, but actually doing small actions that make people feel included no matter who they are, what their background is. It really starts with just those small actions, not these fancy statements and perks.
So true. Being thoughtful, meaningful, and the actions you take, not tokenistic or box ticking, which we see sadly a lot of these do. Yeah, so true. Sançar, it's been a real pleasure. I'm so much there for our listeners to think through, be inspired by. I really love what you're building, and definitely encourage our clients listening and listeners to really check it out, and encourage your bosses, if you're listening and you don't feel you're being supported in this way, whether it's founders or people departments, to really think seriously about it. We've got 3 final quick wrap-up questions, Sançar. In one sentence, what do you think the future holds for Oliva?
Much bigger scale, much bigger impact, and a lot of innovation.
And if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
My granddad, he's unfortunately now passed away, but yeah, he was an incredible mentor.
Lovely answer. And finally, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Actually, from my granddad as well. He used to always say, talking about like cow paths, we used to walk through fields and things, right? He lived in the country, and he would say, some days you step in it and some days you don't. And that always stuck with me. Some days it's going to go your way and some days it's not going to go your way. And that's fine.
Wise words. Your granddad sounds like a very good mentor. Sançar, thank you so much. It's been great to have you on the show and to hear your mentorship and all about Oliva. So thanks for sharing.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
I couldn't think of a better 40-minute mentor for Mental Health Awareness Week. Sançar was refreshingly open and honest with us, and I really do love Oliva's mission. If you did too, and you'd like to find out more, then please do follow the links in the show notes. Before we go, I also wanted to thank you, our loyal listeners, for your ongoing support. We couldn't do this without you, and we love hearing and seeing your feedback in the review section, so please do keep them coming. This podcast also wouldn't be possible without our amazing partners and sponsors. So if you're a brand looking to get direct access to founders, investors, C-suite executives, or other C-suite decision makers, then please make sure you drop our head of marketing Hannah a note on hannah@jbmc.co.uk. She'd love to tell you more about our sponsorship packages. That's all from us today, but please do tune in again next week for some more pocket-sized mentorship.